Welcome to Learn at Work podcast, which is sponsored by iOS Press, the publisher of Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. We're delighted to host this podcast that will bring together insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions on topics that matter most in the realm of health, rehabilitation, work, prevention, and assessment. What can you expect from our podcast? We'll have expert interviews, individuals who have published in the journal, and we'll dive into conversations with leaders who have shared their valuable experience and expertise. You'll learn about different latest work trends, technology, and best practices. I'm Karen Jacobs, the founding editor of Work, and I'm the moderator of these podcasts. Welcome to the very, very first episode of our podcast, Learn at Work. I'm Karen Jacobs. I am the founding editor of the journal Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. And we have pivoted. We've had for many, many years Learn at Work as a webinar series, and we decided to move into this medium, which we thought might be interesting for our listeners in general, but also as a different way of people getting to better understand our journal and the authors and the people who have been part of it since its beginning, when it started. So with great, great pleasure, our first guest is Leonard Matheson. And Len and I go back to the beginning of when the journal began. We met prior to that time, too. But I'd like everybody to get to know Len. So, Len, could you share, where are you physically? I'm in Boston, but where are you? And tell us about your career, and then we'll talk about the intersection with the journal Work. So welcome.
Great. Thanks for the invite, Karen. I really appreciate talking to you and sharing these ideas. I'm in Chico, Northern California, about 75 minutes north of Sacramento. And my wife and I moved here from St. Louis, where I was at WashU in the School of Medicine there, program in occupational therapy. We moved here about 5 years ago now, just to be near our grandkids. And I'm still practicing. My focus over the last few decades has been on neurorehabilitation, working with people who've had concussions and strokes. And I've really been enjoying that quite a lot. So I started my career in 1970, February 3rd, 1970. I met my first client in the pediatrics program at Rancho Los Amigos Hospital in Downey, California. And I was working with teenagers, kids who were 13 to 17 or 18 years old who'd had severe injuries or severe illnesses, severe disabilities. And I did that for the first 3 years of my career and really enjoyed it. It was a great foundation. I was a pre-vocational counselor. I was hired and working for the Vocational Services Department, which was run by Carolyn Vash and Brian Kemp. At that time, Carolyn was a groundbreaking psychologist who, out of her own experience with post-polio syndrome, started the vocational rehabilitation program at Rancho and was a real big contributor to the whole zeitgeist of vocational rehabilitation being crucial as part of medical rehabilitation. So the Vocational Services Department was integrated with all the medical rehab services at Rancho. And Rancho back in those days had 1,300 inpatients, many, many folks to work with, and 30,000 outpatients. So I don't know if these days there is a comparable opportunity for folks to work together on an interdisciplinary basis, but that's how I got started. And I spent the first 10 years of my career there at Rancho, and then got my doctorate while I was working there and continued with the postdoc program for a couple of years in aging with a disability under Brian Kemp's direction at Rancho. So one of the things that drives me is the whole idea of being a teammate, sometimes team leader, sometimes just a contributor, doing the best I can to work with other people with my own expertise, trying to dovetail with their different areas of strength and knowledge. And the work I began to do with you and Linda Niemeyer and other occupational therapists was really grounded in my interdisciplinary focus started at Rancho. And in fact, Linda and I met there back in the mid-'70s, I think. And one of the things that happened to me, which was a wonderful happenstance as I look back on it, was that I was stationed. My actual physical location was in the pediatrics program, which was about half a mile from my boss's office across the highway, this huge facility at Rancho. And so the people who supervised me as a young, know-nothing kid, I guess I was 22 years old when I started, were all occupational therapists and physicians. So between the OTs and the physicians, and I guess nurses would have to be included with that too, but most of my professional mentoring in the first 3 years anyway of my career was from those folks. And I learned right away how important it was to have a work focus, even with those kids. I was doing pre-vocational work with the kids and started to talk with them and their families, with the kids who had futures. Not all of them did. Some of them had diseases that would, of course, have a time-limited experience for them. Many of the kids did die in their teens or early 20s. But for the kids with, for instance, spinal cord injuries or brain injuries who didn't have those kinds of diseases, we wanted to be talking with them about the world of work when they were like 15, 16 years old, not go beyond that, because they and their families needed to get oriented that way. Normally, we don't need to be as intentional about focusing on work if we don't have disabilities. The normal 16, 17-year-old can be asked, are you going to go to college or not? Or what kind of sports are you involved with? We found that it was important to be more intentional with the adolescents, because an important part of their participation with us was long-term planning and getting them set up as best we could with, for instance, the OTs working on accommodations and the PTs working with them on methods to maintain safe mobility, healthy fitness, and so forth, as they moved into high school, and then if the kids went on to junior college or into a trade school, on into their futures. So I did a lot of that work with them back in the day. For instance, taking them on field trips to different businesses. We'd go out and take a look at what people do who are, for instance, scientists at the Rand Corporation in Santa Monica, California, or over at some of the aerospace firms in Southern California. And also really got them onto the college campuses as soon as we could. We had a collegial relationship with the Cerritos Community College, which was a few miles away from Rancho, and we did field trips over there. And then eventually we had Cerritos take some of our space in some of the old buildings and recommission those buildings for an off-site campus, off-site for Cerritos, on-site on the Rancho grounds for our kids and other adults who would go through what was called the Work Preparation Center to be evaluated in terms of their abilities and interests, and then begin to focus on starting to take real transitional and highly tailored courses in this community college offshoot at Rancho. And the community college instructors there were very much oriented towards, this is before IEPs were known. We did our own IEPs with the Rancho team, meeting with the community college instructors, and set up programs that the kids, young people, young adults, and older folks as well would be able to transition from being hospital patients being hospital outpatients, to being students, and then eventually getting into the world of work. And that was just a wonderful thing to be able to do with so many people. We had hundreds of people going through every year. We had, I think I supervised at one point, 9 or 10 counselors, vocational counselors who were also psychologists, most of them, working with helping people do the early transition from their disability status, where really just focusing on surviving and trying to make it through the day, to starting to develop goals and look forward to bright futures. Then we did a handoff to the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, which we also had cited there at Rancho, and they had about 15 counselors. And so we did our pre-vocational counselor work at the Work Preparation Center, and then dovetailed with the Department of Voc Rehab counselors as our kids and adults went off into the world with DVR support. And not just in our community there in Downey, but also as people went home to their communities throughout the Western United States, mostly in California, but we had folks from some of the neighboring states as well. So, but it was a great way to get started, and focused on interdisciplinary teamwork, and did the best I could to continue to be a team member the rest of my career.
Yes, and you did some name dropping there, people that are so well known, worldwide in this field. And Linda Niemeyer also has been part of the editorial board of Work for many, many years. You really laid the foundation for so much of the collaboration that we see today. Now, fast forward. What are you doing now? And you have something that you're starting with the Work Journal as well.
Is Bridging the Gap is the title of probably a bi-monthly piece we've already sent in to have be accepted by you. And thank you for your editorial help with that, by the way, Karen.
You're very welcome. In fact, it'll be published before this first episode comes out, so we'll have people. We'll have a link to it on our workjournal.org website.
Good to hear. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So bridging the gap between the hospital and the workplace is where I think we need to spend more time and get all of us involved, but especially OTs. The occupational therapists haven't done as much as I would like them to do. And I think I've mentioned to you before, Karen, taught in OT schools and spent 15 years at Washington University School of Medicine in the program in occupational therapy as a professor there. And emphasizing, we call it ocupology, focused on work-oriented neurorehabilitation. But aside from that early foray into having a work-oriented focus for OTs in graduate school, I don't think there is a work-oriented program in any of the OT schools in the United States now. I did some checking around before getting online with you this morning, and I didn't find any. I may be mistaken. I think Colorado State's doing some work with transitioning young folks into the world of work, but I don't think any of the OT programs are focused on helping people of working age get back into the workforce. And that's an important issue for two reasons, I think. One, there are more than 9 million people in the United States of working age who are receiving Social Security disability benefits. And many of those people, I think, can be helped. I've helped some of them, and I know you have. And if we take a look at some of the work that could be done to help a large number of people who are underserved, OTs could really help with those folks get back to work because of the second important issue, and that is the ADA is now 30 years old, and OTs are the best profession to work with folks on accommodated employment. And accommodated employment is terrifically underutilized. It's really amazing to me that we haven't taken advantage of the ADA as much as we need to. Title I of the ADA focused on return to work issues, employment issues in general, but from my perspective, return to work issues really gives great opportunities for all of us to get people back into the workforce. over the last 20 years or so, I've been focusing on accommodated employment for my clients and doing work in the forensic arena, promoting accommodated employment. And that's just something that we really need to take another look at and get back into.
So then, accommodated employment, just so very, very important. How can we motivate people to see that this is an area that they should explore, and hopefully start working it? What can we do?
Well, I think several things. Most of the early advances in occupational rehabilitation began at the state level. For instance, work hardening was something that I did some early work on developing at Rancho, but we didn't get very far unless we had the involvement of the Occupational Therapy Association of California, OTAC. Linda Niemeyer, Chris Violette, Karen Schultz were OTAC leaders back in the day who saw the importance of work hardening and helped to develop that, starting at Rancho and then going throughout California and then eventually around the United States and throughout the world. Occupational associations, occupational therapy associations really need to take a look at what they can do locally with some of their wonderful potentialities they've got. But AJOT also needs to do, AOTA and AJOT need to be more involved in the whole process. Karen, the work journal really needs to be accompanied by the other professional journals, AJOT, Journal of Occupational Rehab, focusing on this issue of transitioning from the hospital to the workplace. And occupational therapists need to be more highly represented there.
Yeah, I totally agree. So maybe one of the things that we can do with this first episode is to challenge people. Challenge people to see this as an area of practice and to develop expertise in it so that they can really make an important contribution.
Yeah, and I think one of the areas that is a low-hanging fruit for OTs especially is to focus on cognitive rehab, focused on work. I call it work-oriented neuro rehab. And what's different now than when you and I got started is that we've transitioned from the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, the DOT, to the Occupational Information Network, the ONET. And ONET has 21 cognitive variables of the 52 ability variables. So this expansion of the look at jobs in terms of the cognitive demands of work is a beautiful fit to what OTs are trained to do. And so I think OTs really need to get involved. The neuropsychologists would welcome OT involvement. And I can speak as a psychologist now, working in neuro rehab. We need OTs to get involved as partners. And there are some, Matt Dodson, Kelly Deeker here in the United States, Min Kai and Tanya Percy up in Canada. There's some real wonderful OTs that are already leading the way in terms of neuro rehab, but we need to have more OTs get involved.
Well, as an occupational therapist, you know that you're singing my song. So I hope people listen to this episode and get inspired to be part of this. And perhaps people students who are in school now could see this as an emerging area of practice for themselves and to explore more and reach out to some of the people like yourself who are knowledgeable in this area. So Len, we're concluding now the podcast, this episode, and I want to thank you. But before we can conclude, I love asking this last question. What's your why? What gets you up in the morning? What fills your day? What's your why?
Well, some long-standing whys. One, my grandfather, my mother's father, was injured as a firefighter in Tulsa when he was in his, I think he was about 21 years old. And they didn't have workers' comp back then, and he struggled. He got back to work eventually, but then got re-injured back at work. And then he had to become a hobo. He abandoned his family because he couldn't support the family and was just, I never got to know him. He died well before I was born. But that was part of our family lore, that my mother and her siblings and her mom were abandoned because he couldn't take care of the family. And that is a tragedy we need to just never happen anymore. So workers' comp has always been important to me. I think it really could have helped him. But beyond that, my paternal grandfather was injured in World War I and was helped by the Veterans Administration so that when he got out and got set up in Los Angeles as a handyman, he went over to what was called the Old Soldiers' Home and talked to the docs there, and they would have an outpatient go and live with him and my grandmother in a little apartment in the garage behind their home in downtown Los Angeles, and go out on the job with my grandfather. And over the years, from when I was a toddler, literally when I was a toddler, these gentlemen would be mentored by my grandfather and my dad as well to go out into the world of work. And many of them did get set up. Most of them had schizophrenia and what we called, well, now we call it PTSD. Back in the day, it was a combination of depression and brain injury. But those are the kind of antecedents of why I'm just feeling really comfortable and compelled to do this work. I really love doing it.
Well, thank you for sharing your narratives. And it's so nice to see how our own lived experiences and those of our family really impact us. Len, thank you so much for being the first guest on our Learn at Work podcast, and I hope people will subscribe to it. Please go to our website, workjournal.org, to learn more. And thanks again.
Karen, before we go, let me just say people need to support the journal too.
Thank you, Len.
You're really a groundbreaking entity, and we need to be better supported. I just really enjoy working with you.
Oh, thank you. And likewise.